Good morning. Today is Tuesday, July 18th, 2023. If you were told you could give one last message to your descendants, what would you tell them? Rabbi Joseph Telushkin wrote an article a number of years ago where he sets out that, in fact, this is precisely what the book of Devarim, the fifth book of the Torah, that we start to read this Shabbos with the Parsha of Devarim, this is exactly the challenge that Moshe confronts. The Jewish people that he has forged and guided for 40 years, they are poised to enter the land of Israel, but Moshe knows that he will not go in with them. He knows that the end of his life is imminent. And so the entire book of Devarim, starting in our Torah portion, consists of his farewell message. Now, there's an interesting dispute among the commentators about the theme of this message, because I've shared with you before, each book of the Torah has several different names. One of the names for this book is Mishneh Torah. Now, Mishneh Torah literally means restatement of the Torah, repetition of the Torah, and Tosfos, the great medieval commentary, explains that's exactly what it is. It is a restatement, a review, a repetition of the major themes that we found through the first four books of the Torah, that will serve as the basis of society and values as the Jewish people begins the new chapter of creating a society and a civilization in Israel. The Netziv, Rabbi Naftali Tzvi Hirsch Berlin, of the 1800s, quotes Targum Onkelos, who says it's a similar idea, but a little bit different in an important way. The book of Devarim is Pas Shegen Orayasa. It is a distillation of the messages of the 40 years in the desert. It is an explanation, a commentary, a distillation. So not necessarily everything is repeated, but the lessons are distilled and clarified so that it will be easier for the Jewish people to take this with them, to guide them as they come into the land of Israel. And the Netziv mentions in his commentary this word shinun, which means to sharpen a person's understanding of something. We have this word famously in not this week's Torah portion, but next week's Parsha, where we have the Shema. The Torah says, V'shinantem levanecha. The simple translation is that you will teach the Torah to your children, but the V'shinantem, has as its root shinun, which means to sharpen. It's not enough just to teach something to someone. You have to teach it in a way that they understand it clearly. Not just when they finish the learning, it's kind of hazy. Yeah, I heard what they said, but I don't exactly understand it exactly. No, Vishinanta means I understand clearly and lucidly the lesson that I'm supposed to learn. And the goal of the book of Devarim, according to the Netziv, is for Moshe, through his speeches, to reach this level where the Jewish people have a clear, sharp, focused understanding of the lessons they are to learn. And all of this, the entire book, takes place within the last week of Moshe's life. Rabbi Tzvi Hirsch Weinreb points out that there is one fundamental lesson that underlies the entire book, but in two facets. And that lesson is, you can accomplish almost anything with effort and persistence. We see this lesson in Mishneh Torah and the book of Devarim in the substance, the content of the book. The entire Jewish people was able to learn the entire Torah over a period of 40 years. It took time, it took effort, it took persistence, but they completed this gigantic task by the end of the 40-year period. And there's another facet to this of the accomplishment that comes with effort and persistence, and that is the transformation, evolution, but really transformation of Moshe, the person, from the first time we meet him until the last time at the end of his life. Because remember, the first time we met Moshe, speaking to God at the burning bush, remember God wanted Moshe to lead the Jewish people, and remember what Moshe said. Be Hashem, please God, don't send me. Lo ish dvarim anochi, I am not a person of words. Ki mitmol gam mishulshon, gam me'az, daber el avdecha. I was never a person who was able to speak clearly and efficiently and eloquently. Ki kvad peh ukvad lashon anochi. I have a difficulty with speaking and I have a difficulty with language. I'm not a person to be a speaker. And here we are at the end of his life, 40 years later, where Moshe is delivering this lengthy and eloquent address that we're about to read over the next several Torah portions. How did Moshe overcome his limitations from 40 years ago? Our rabbis ask these questions in the Midrash Tanchuma, and they give a variety of answers. You see from here the astounding power of sincere and sustained Torah study. Moshe was learning the entire time. He was developing, he was growing, and his skill came as a result of his effort. He had years of practice, 40 years of practice. It did not come easily to him. He worked, he studied, he practiced, he reviewed, he repeated, he improved. And over the years, he got better. And it's also true that there was a healing that came from Moshe's connection with God. Because as we say in our prayers, God is the ultimate healer. You know, we don't often think so much about the life of Moshe, the man, the person. But it's important that we do so. Because although every one of us has our own unique challenges and shortcomings and obstacles and difficulties, we too are capable of coping with them or even possibly overcoming them, in the process evolving, even transforming ourselves. And Moshe's effort, Moshe's persistence, Moshe's work on himself causes Moshe to be a role model for every single one of us. Moshe can also be a role model for us in another critical way. Now, I spoke recently about considering and discussing death, especially our death, may it not come for a long time, with our children in advance so that they may make arrangements. We may make arrangements, as many arrangements as is possible while we are still alive and capable of doing so, to make sure that it accords with our wishes, and also to reduce the emotional turmoil and the tension and even the arguing, if all of those discussions have to start the moment that someone passes away. If we can arrange our funeral, our plots, maybe who will speak at our funeral, what will they say at our funeral? And I want to repeat, I find all of this life-affirming, not morbid in any way, but as a way of recognizing what is a meaningful life. But there's another matter for each of us to consider well in advance, because we never know when our ability to do the following will no longer be with us. It could happen in a moment. Is not only to prepare our financial will, which is very important to do, and as I have said before many times, to arrange our financial affairs in a way that eases and lessens any kind of disharmony about someone feeling that they were mistreated in any way. That's an extremely important point. We've discussed that before. But we also need to prepare our ethical will. Like Moshe, what do we want our last words to be? What lessons, what instruction, what inspiration do we want our children, our grandchildren, our friends to remember us for? Moshe does it, starting in this week's Parsha, over the entire book of Devarim. We have a long passage in the Torah where Jacob, our patriarch, does this, as he gathers all of his family around him near the end of his life, and the Torah describes in detail what he says to each child. And we should do it. Not in a morbid or guilt-inducing way, but in a life-affirming, constructive way that will help and inspire our children and grandchildren long after our physical life ends. Over the years, I have shared many beautiful examples of this with you. Today, I just want to share one lesson from Dr. David Pelcovitz. Going back to the scene of Yaakov at the end of his life in the Parsha of Vayechi, at the end of Bereshis, where he gathers his children together and he gives each one of them a blessing. And the verse says, Ish asher kivirchaso berachosam. He blessed each one according to their appropriate blessing. Didn't just give one blessing for everybody. Each person got their own individual blessing. He quotes Rabbi Yerucham Levovitz, which was then often quoted by Dr. Abraham Twersky. If what you have in mind when you bless your kids are your own dreams and wishes for your child, and I know so many situations where this happens. You want her to be a doctor because you never made it into medical school, or because you did make it into medical school. You want him to be a Torah scholar because that's what you think is important. That's a big mistake. It's as if you are taking a pail of water and watering a plot of earth that has no seeds in it. There has to be a match between your child's potential and your wishes for him or her. Each message has to be tailored to uplift that individual. And then Dr. Pelcovitz tells the story of his own father, Rabbi Raphael Pelcovitz, an amazing synagogue rabbi in the Far Rockaway area for so many years. On the last day of his life, he went to one of my children, an adult child who is a little bit out of the box. A wonderful, very successful guy, but he marches to the beat of a different drum. My father held on to his grandson and said, Chaim, just be Chaim. And those were his last words. My friends, I wish you a wonderful day, and I look forward to seeing you all soon in person.